Anyway, too often, you'll know, we sing songs, we sing praises to the Lord, and we concentrate so much on our singing voice that we forget to look at the words. This song touched me, and if you look at Psalm 23:4, it says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. For you're with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me." I think that sums up being well with your soul. Many years ago, though, a choir director in North Carolina gave a little presentation about this song, and it touched me. And I said, I got to share this at some point in the future. And here we are more than 20 years later. Are you signaling me? No. Oh. 20 years later, and here it is, I finally have an opportunity, and thank you for the cooperation of our praise team to do that particular hymn at this time. So, the words of the song, such a powerful expression of faith in God, I titled this, Unwavering Faith. And thanks to some research by a man named Al Maxey. He had a lot of history on this particular song, so I'll be quoting him throughout this, and it's such a wonderful story. So let's get into it. Is it okay now? Yeah. Okay. To have unwavering faith is to have complete trust or confidence in God and His Word, and is to believe wholeheartedly without any doubt or hesitation. In other words, it is to have complete faith. So I want to share this story about the man who penned these words, and his name is Horatio Gates Spafford. He was born October 20th. I didn't do anything. There you go. Yeah, let me do that. I think Ray gave me inferior equipment.
We'll pray on it.
Okay. Ooh. This one works. Okay, so let me introduce you to this guy. His name is Horatio Gates Spafford Jr. He was born in October 1828 in Troy, New York. He was brought up in a very well-to-do family, and they were a politically prominent family in New York. As a result, he was blessed with a good education. He became a lawyer, was admitted to the bar, and then decided to relocate to the windy city of Chicago in 1856 to practice law. He became a partner in the firm of Spafford, McDade, and Wilson. In 1861, Horatio G. Spafford met and married Anna Lawson, a Norwegian immigrant 14 years his junior. By now, he was a prominent lawyer in a senior law firm. He and his wife were also prominent supporters and close friends with evangelist Dwight L. Moody, and I believe you all know Dwight L. Moody. They lived in a home known as Lakeview, and it was 12 miles north of Chicago. And then over the next decade, the Spaffords devoted themselves to numerous causes for public good. Not only were they involved in the work of the church, but they became increasingly involved in supporting several great evangelists. They were blessed with 4 young daughters, Annie, Maggie, Bessie, and Tanita. Everything seemed to be going Spafford's way. He was well educated, prosperous, had a wonderful family, and they were active in the work of the Lord. Sounds pretty much like our biblical character, Job. The very first line of the hymn he would later write depicted very well his present reality. When peace like a river attendeth my way, Spafford's life had been richly blessed. Like Job, there would soon be unleashed upon this good man and his family almost unbelievable tragedy. Would his faith survive such a an assault. The first significant test of Horatio Spafford's faith arrived in October 1871. It would come in the form of an event known as the Great Chicago Fire. I believe we all heard about the Great Chicago Fire. In that fire, nearly 300 people lost their lives. It left 100,000 people homeless and destroyed over $190 million worth of property and leveled the entire central business district of the city. The fire broke out just after 9 p.m. on October 8th in the barn of Patrick and Catherine O'Leary on DeCoven Street. Apparently that was a main road. By the time the firefighters arrived, the fire was already raging out of control. The traditional account of the origin of this great fire is that it was started by a cow kicking over a lantern in O'Leary's barn. How many believe that? You heard that before. Well, Michael Ahern, the Chicago Republican reporter who created the cow story, admitted in 1893 that he had made it up because he thought that it would make colorful copy. The fire spread was aided by the city's overuse of wood for building, strong northwesterly winds, and a drought before the fire. Chicago's fire department had also made the fatal error of not reacting soon enough to the alarm. It burned for 2 days and was finally extinguished by the rain. Spafford had invested heavily in the real estate in downtown Chicago. And during the 2 days the fires raged through the city, Horatio Spafford literally watched his fortune go up in smoke. Although his home, being north of the city, and his family all survived, his financial fortunes had taken a tremendous blow. Rather than despairing, however, Horatio and his family spent the next 2 years helping the people affected by the fire to put their lives back together. They used what resources God had left them to assist the homeless, feed the hungry, and comfort the grief-stricken. The Spaffords used this great tragedy as an opportunity to show the love of the Lord to others. And then rather feeling sorry for themselves, they reached out to others. Rather than hoarding what they had left, they shared it with those who had nothing. Their finances may have taken a big loss, but the faith did not. Almost 2 years of such benevolence efforts among the afflicted of Chicago left the Spaffords a little tired, and they decided they would take his weary family for a vacation to get some much-needed rest. They planned to meet up with evangelist Dwight Moody and the great American singer and hymnist Ira Sankey in England to help with one of their evangelical crusades, and then afterward to travel some in Europe. Horatio, his wife, the 4 daughters, traveled to New York to board the ship to Europe. Several others traveled with them, including their French governess and 5 ministers who were returning to Europe following a conference in America. At the last minute, a business obligation prevented Horatio from joining the family, forcing him to return to Chicago. The family decided to go on ahead and he would join them later. Anna and the 4 girls boarded the French steamship Ville de Havre, along with 307 other passengers and crew, while Horatio returned to Chicago. At approximately 2 a.m. on November 22nd, 1873, in the eastern part of the North Atlantic, the passengers were jolted out of their sleep by what sounded like 2 loud claps of thunder. Making their way to the main deck from the berthing compartments below, the stunned passengers discovered their ship had been rammed by an Irish cargo vessel, Loch Earn, tearing the Ville de Havre almost in half. The Ville de Havre sank to the bottom of the sea in a mere 12 minutes. Anna Spafford and her daughters were seen huddled in one loving cluster, their governess and the ministers nearby. Then, in a terrifying moment, The sea swept over the ship as it sank, casting the passengers into the cold, dark waters of the North Atlantic. Anna Spafford later spoke of being sucked violently downward. Baby Tanita was torn from her arms by a collision with some heavy debris, with a blow so violent that Anna's arm was severely bruised. She flared at the water trying to catch her baby. Anna caught Tanita's gown for just a moment before another smashing blow tore the little girl out of her arms forever. Reaching out again, all she could find was a man's leg in corduroy trousers. Anna, barely conscious, was then swirled about in a whirlpool before surfacing near the lock urn. She instinctively clung on to a small plank, and the next thing she recalled was the splash of an oar as she lay at the bottom of a small boat. Bruised and sick, her long hair was matted with salt, her dressing gown shredded. But the pain in her body was nothing compared to the pain in her heart as she realized that her 4 daughters had been lost in the disaster. In the darkness of the northern Atlantic, 226 people perished in the sea while the Wilderhaven sank, including all 4 daughters of Horatio and Anna's 4 daughters of Horatio and Anna Spafford. The bodies of Annie, Maggie, Bessie, and Tanita, they were never found. Anna and her governess, however, survived. The vessel that had rammed their ship, even though it was damaged, picked them up. And then another ship came by, picked up the survivors, and transferred them from the lock urn, then carried them to Wales, docking at Cardiff. From this location, on December 1st, 1873, Anna Spafford sent the following brief cable to her husband in the city of Chicago. "Saved alone, what shall I do?" Spafford immediately left on the next available ship to join his wife in Wales. According to Bertha Spafford, now she's the 5th daughter born to Horatio and Anna a few years later. She said the captain of the ship that was carrying her father to Europe to meet up with her mother called Spafford to the bridge, informing him, "A careful reckoning has been made, and I believe we are now passing the place where the Wilderhaven was wrecked. The water is 3 miles deep." Bertha recounts that her father, that night in his cabin, wrote the words to the hymn, "It is well with my soul," a hymn that one historian called the most widely used hymn of consolation in modern Christianity. "It is well with my soul" is an expression of faith and trust in one's God in spite of the raging storms that threaten to overwhelm us. It is an expression of unwavering hope in the face of almost an unimaginable grief. It is a hymn we have all sung countless times, yet few may know the trauma behind the writing of these words. They come from a man who just experienced losses, hard for most of us to truly comprehend, and who nevertheless maintained a deep love for the Lord. In the words of the one biographer, this hymn reveals a person who had been graced by God to mourn without bitterness, to sorrow without anger, to trust without resentment, and to rest in the peace of Christ which surpasses every man's understanding. The music for this poem was not composed until 1876, and the tune was written by Philip Bliss. This beloved hymn was first sung in public by Philip Bliss himself on November 24th, 1876, before a large gathering of ministers hosted by D.L. Moody in Chicago's Farewell Hall. This was just 3 years after the tragic shipwreck, and ironically, just 1 month before Bliss and his wife perished in a horrible train wreck. The Spaffords decided they would start life over again. Following his reunion with his wife in Europe, Horatio and Anna returned to Chicago to resume their lives together. They would have 3 more children together. In 1876, they had a son whom they named Horatio. 2 years later, on March 24th, 1878, their daughter Bertha, who we mentioned before, was born. And sadly, however, the little boy died of scarlet fever at the age of 4. Thus, yet another tragedy had befallen this family. About the same time, though, another daughter was born to them, and they named her Grace. It was at this time that Horatio Spafford decided to make a major change in his life. He and his family decided to leave America and resettle in the Holy Land. In a letter to a friend, Horatio wrote, "Jerusalem is where my Lord lived, suffered, and conquered, and I too wish to learn how to live, suffer, and especially to conquer." In September 1881, this family and a few friends immigrated to Israel, settled in a house in the old part of the city of Jerusalem, and established what later came to be known as the American colony. Their mission was simply to show the love of Jesus in their daily living to those about them by serving the needs of the poor, afflicted, and outcast. This colony of Christians would later become the subject of the 2-volume Nobel Prize-winning work for literature, Jerusalem, written by Swedish novelist Selma Lagerlöf. One Christian historian wrote, "Moved by a series of profound tragic losses, Horatio and Anna may have lost 5 of their own children in tragic circumstances, but their love for the Lord and others motivated them to turn that suffering into ministry onto tens of thousands of children in need. They rose above their personal suffering and brought the comfort of Christ to others who were afflicted." Tragedy continued for Anna, however. When Horatio died of malaria in 1888, he was buried in Jerusalem. Anna continued their work in Jerusalem until her own death in 1923. Looking back at their remarkable lives and treasuring their victory of faith over all Satan was able to throw their way, I think we can safely say of them, it is well with their souls. My purpose for sharing this story is not to make you sad, but to show how we can overcome every adversity in our life when we fully trust in God. Too often, when tragedy strikes, people run away from God. We as Christians run to God, and we lay everything at His feet. Only God can give you the comfort that you need. Nowhere else and no one else can provide it. Psalm 27:14 is a good reminder. It said, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord.